my Dinks friends. It is Wednesday night. It is June. The weather is absolutely crappy outside. So it's a perfect night to be hanging out with all of you and hanging out with my besties, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. As you know, we are the dentists in the know, and our job is to bring all of you in the know. We are your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. We are live. Jennifer looks like I brought her on way too early. I'm not sure what's
I
going
was actually sending an angry text to Chad. It felt so therapeutic.
Anyway, it's good to have the crowd back together again. Dr. Chad is back from Italy on less than 24 hours. So I don't know how he's going to hold up, but we'll see how that goes. And of course, our rock, Dr. Jennifer Bell. So I've already told you, our job is to help bring all of you in the know. And guys, it is great to see you.
We're really glad you're here tonight. We have a great guest, so just stay tuned for that. But first, as always, we're going to bring you the latest and greatest, and sometimes the scariest and very obscure and weird news in the dental community. And I have to tell you, like, it's become kind of, as I'm sorting through the articles and deciding which ones we want to talk about for the evening, it's like governmental oddities and obscurities, murders, deaths, and illegal transactions in the dental community. And then, some random, maybe corporate news. So these are the categories we're starting to sort of slowly build. So let's go right into it, if we shall. First off, I've got to give a shout out to Rhode Island, next state on the list wanting to push forward with a medical loss ratio. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that as we get closer to election time. But for our very small community friends, dental friends in Rhode Island, we're watching you. We see what you're doing. There's a trend of multiple states because of Massachusetts' success and significant success, like a heavy majority, over 70%, supporting that particular legislation. Many states are now recognizing that as an opportunity to take advantage of the momentum to bring that medical loss ratio language into their own law. And so we're seeing that moving forward with multiple states. So we'll have that master list for you of the states that have it available on their ballot for November of 2023, and probably ballots for 2024 as well. So keep an eye out. And if you hear any other states that are considering it, please let me know. Here's the interesting thing about fluoride. We've been talking a lot about fluoride, more than I thought we would in 2023, since it's been municipal water supply systems, I believe, a little before my time, but the 60s, 70s in the US. But here we are again, still talking about it. So here is your government at work, everyone, when we have multiple entities working on their own behalf and maybe not communicating with one another. So the CDC just released a study. They are a little concerned about some of the fluoridation management systems that are out there for all the municipal water supplies. And they are concerned that more than 16% of municipal water supplies out there today that are fluoridating water are below the therapeutic value of 0.7 milligrams per liter in their communities. Now, there are lots of communities that may not even be reporting that data to the CDC, and they sort of break it down into different categories. So of the communities that are reporting that, here was the most disturbing statistic. Only 4,000 of the 54,000, I think, communities that currently program of reporting their fluoridation statistics to the CDC are actively adjusting fluoridation levels based on water quality and quantity values and achieving like a 99% accuracy rate of it being around that 0.7 to 1 milligram per liter. And I thought, man, that seems kind of scary that, we just sort of trust but verify, right? That our water fluoridation systems are working and constantly adjusting. But it sounds like to me, many of them just have a protocol of the dump. There's a certain amount that they're putting into each vat of water that's coming through that they're filtering, sourcing, and then sending out into the community without actively testing where the incoming water's fluoridation levels are. So, I think there's a lot to be said about improvements in technology that could be had in the municipal water communities to ensure that those levels are always staying at a very safe below 2 milligrams per liter. But meanwhile, on the opposite side, the EPA is saying we need to put different filtration systems into the water supply because they're currently worried about the forever chemicals, the pre and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals. I don't know, probably through plastics that are getting into the water supply, and they're seeing it in blood, urine, other mucus things that they're testing from time to time, I reckon. And they are concerned about these forever chemicals because they're linked more towards cancers and other type of long-term diseases. And so they're trying to introduce a bunch of filtration systems that are going to weed out a lot of those particular chemicals. The concern is that that filtration level will actually also filter out all the fluoride. So meanwhile, the CDC is trying to manage the municipal water supply system to ensure that the fluoride is correct and actively working at an optimal level for caries prevention. And we've got the EPA saying, we're going to put in these filters to block out these other types of chemicals that we're worried about, which may also capture the fluoride. So everybody's sort of watching these different entities and how they're going to ultimately, we hope, interact together to come up with best guidances to ensure safety of our population, but also maybe if we're continuing to support the fluoridation program, that we're offering it at the optimal level and not too high or too low. And then let's not forget that the FDA is also looking at toxicity levels of fluoride and actually considering pulling it from the safe and approved chemical use for municipal water supplies. So that's a whole nother piece of this very interesting puzzle. So there's a lot happening in the fluoride level sort of simultaneously, which does make me think that there's probably an overarching thing, which I cannot see, that is sort of dictating how we're looking at fluoride in our community. So stay tuned for that. Another HPI statistics coming out from the ADA this last month, showing the affiliation of dentists into DSOs has gone up quite significantly, almost a 10% increase since 2008. But we're looking at right now, almost a quarter of graduating dentists up to 10 years in practice are affiliating with a DSO style practice. It's around 11% of those reporting the statistics to the ADA within the less than 25, so 11 to 25 years in practice are affiliated with the DSO, and then 7% of those that are greater than 25 years. But those numbers have all gone up in every single category. And so obviously a slight shift in the market, probably not dissimilar from what we saw in the medical community 20 years ago, as a lot of amalgamation of different practices are coming together, and just a consolidation of the dental model as a whole. So we'll keep you posted on that. And then, Chad sent me this article right before we went on air. And as always, we've got, the government stuff, we've got where we are in our workforce, things we need to be watching for. And then we move to the oddities and obscurities and criminal acts category of the news segment. Tonight is no exception. Earlier last week, we posted about a little local community in Texas where an individual had been dumping dental models into potholes to help solve the community's pothole problem. The only real egregious error I see, other than the fact that that probably wasn't the most efficient way to solve the problem, was that all the models had names on them. So, I'm sure you all looked at that story and thought, number one, what a weird idea. Like, were you sitting at your kitchen table? Were you watching YouTube? Were you gardening when the epiphany struck in your brain that today was going to be the day that you were going to go dump a bunch of those old orthodontic models that you've been saving for 40 years into the potholes that were annoying the mess out of you on the front road in front of your house? I don't know. I genuinely would like to understand the thought process that got us to this place. Be that as it may, they found a ton of dental models in potholes. Obviously, they had names on them, which we can all agree would likely be a HIPAA violation. Where that story is going to go, I don't know. Meanwhile, in Virginia, just a few states east of Texas, we had a daughter come in and kill her father, who was a dentist, Dr. Abby Horwitz, not Horowitz, but Horwitz, a beloved dentist in their community, and the daughter stabbed the father to death. But at least this week, I didn't have to report about any dentists that were practicing dentistry illegally in a hotel room, or, shipping illegal supplies overseas. I mean, at least it's just dental molds and a murder. And with that, that's the news.
All right. Well, we got a fantastic guest tonight. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. They've put together a really incredible program of education and coaching. And Chad, would you be so kind as to introduce our guest?
I would. I'm excited to have our guest on tonight. It's Mr. Steven Anderson. He is pretty dynamic in dentistry. Although he's not a dentist, he knows dentistry inside and out. And he's got a couple of groups, Total Patient Service Institute, the Crown Council, Keystone Dental Management, the Dental Warranty Corp. He's been named Dental Businessman of the Year by Excellence in Dentistry. He's the author of several books. And, I'm not going to read his entire bio, but I'm just going to say that I'm pretty excited to find out that I have a new neighbor. I mean, it's like Mr. freaking Rogers here. I just took off my cardigan, or I put on my cardigan. I put on my tennis shoes. We're going to go on a walk down memory lane here. This guy lives about 5 miles from my house. Super excited to have him here. Steve, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you.
Chad, thank you. And Jeff and Jennifer, thank you for that beautiful prelude to our program this evening.
Yeah.
Welcome, Steve.
Won't you be my neighbor?
Yeah, you want to talk about dental murders or illegal practice in a hotel room?
It was great. And thank you for the Texas reference, because, that's where we are. So,
yeah.
Yeah. I will say, and maybe it's because Chad's on the program, as one of the hosts, but it does seem like a disproportionate amount of the weird stories that I have come out of Texas.
Well, it's because we have a disproportionate amount of the land mass and the population. Yeah. So it just,
there you go. Okay.
It happens.
Yeah. We're going to go with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not only are they from the same area, I think they shop at the same bookshelf furniture store.
Do.
I know. Look at that.
But do you notice? Do you notice how many more books Steve has than Chad? Chad has helmets and.
Chad reads and weeds. I just read and collect.
Yeah, I'm telling you right now. I don't think I've read any of these.
I was going to say. I'd love to say
the majority of them are decorative in nature. Yeah. Like, who the hell is going to read that thing up there? I don't know. My wife puts them up there. I just do what I'm told.
Chad, it looks nice, man.
Yeah.
Just go with it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Game.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're honored to have you here. And I know that we wanted to talk about kind of being insurance free a little bit. Am I far off the topic of that? I know.
Not too far off. And I'll tell you what's kind of ignited this, you guys, is I've been doing this for a minute or two. And in all the years that we've been involved in dentistry, there has never been a time where there has been that we have fielded so many questions from practices all over the country about the whole insurance equation. Insurance is not new. It's been around forever. But in terms of the focus and the attention on it, and here's, not lost on any of us what the dynamics are. And Jennifer, you mentioned it in your very first story about Massachusetts is a perfect example of this. Crazy stuff that's been going on in Massachusetts, and hence the backlash from the dental community to get new legislation passed. But here's the dynamics. Econ 101. So highest interest rates we've had in 40 years. So the cost of doing business is going up. Just when the cost of money goes up, the cost of business. Inflation, 40-year high, right? So we haven't seen inflation like this since the 80s. And then you've got all the dynamics in the economy. And then for some strange reason, practices keep getting letters from insurance companies saying, we're whacking your reimbursement rate. So we're going to pay you less. Even though it's costing more to run your practice and do business, we're going to pay you less. And it makes absolutely no sense. And so when you just work the numbers, you have to ask yourself, in a lot of cases, is this sustainable? As a, take dentistry out of it. If you're just looking purely at the numbers and didn't even know what industry this is in and looked at income versus outflow and the cost of staffing, and that hasn't gotten any cheaper. And so costs are escalating, reimbursement rates going down. It's like something's got to give and something's got to change. So I get that question all the time. And the question, Jeff or Chad, as you've said, is, should I be insurance free? Should I go fee for service? And it's not a one and done proposition. There's not a one answer for every practice. Every market is different. Every practice is different. And so it really is a question. It's not an answer, which is there's a lot of pressing questions that I believe every practice should be asking themselves at this particular turning point in time to say, what is my relationship with insurance? How do I evaluate that? And how do I continue evaluating that over time so I do what's right for my business and I have a sustainable business model that's going to take me through the time we are in today and carry me on into the future. And it's, Jennifer, it's across the board. You mentioned, the whole DSO trend. I get calls every day from DSOs that are considering this same equation based on the markets they're in, the patient base they want to serve, and what's going on in the particular marketplaces. So it's across the board. This doesn't have anything to do necessarily as much with practice ownership and the ownership model as it is. This is pure economics of what's going on.
That's really interesting, and I totally agree. And today was a day at my practice where I really wanted to jump ship and join with you because we're fee for service, so we don't assign to any PPOs or HMOs or DMOs or whatever. But we've been using a company that will remain nameless to kind of help us catch up on some lost claims. And we were doing the analysis today, and I'm like, okay, with what we're paying them versus what we're receiving, it's not adding up. And I'm like, just cut it loose. I mean, I'm done. And it's the most frustrating part of our job, but the majority of us don't know how to break free. Mm-hmm. And we're fearful of it, quite honestly, and then the flip side of it is we're looking for a hygienist. And you've got one today that graduated. They have 13 years of experience in dentistry, graduated from hygiene school in 2021, and they're asking for $65 an hour.
Right. It's crazy.
That's the third application we've received in 2 weeks.
Yep. Because that's what they were told down at the Texas A&M hygiene school. Because I teach down there.
Well, here's the thing, and this is one of the things that I think that we need to address too. And I know that I'm totally off topic, but I got to throw it out there. You've got a demand for hygienists, yet you've got hygiene schools decreasing their acceptance rates or acceptance numbers to schools, and so that demand's not going to be met. And so, where do we go?
Well, and I'll tell you on that point, Chad, it's the old rule of, find a need and fill it. And there are some pockets around the country where there's some initiatives being taken to solve the problem. For example, in North Dakota, they're working on a hygiene program where they can get hygienists in and out of school with a bachelor's degree in 2.5 years to accelerate the process because there's such a demand for it. There's one in Southern California that's working on the same problem. So there's huge opportunity. Anytime there's this kind of a shortage, big time opportunity to shift the model. We haven't figured it all out yet. But there's going to be some big changes that are going to come just because we've got to pivot to figure out the staffing problem.
Hey,
the problem is though.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, JB.
Is that private equity sees money in educating dentists, and they don't yet apparently see money in educating hygienists. So if you look at the number of dental schools that have opened up in the last 5 years and are slated to open up in the next 3, and then you look at shrinking dental hygiene programs, and that if dental hygiene acceptance, graduation, putting them in the market is dependent on the government to create these infrastructures to catch up with what is already accelerated beyond their control.
It won't happen
That
fast
gap
enough.
gets worse, if not unattainable to solve, because you've got capital investments happening on one end of the market and government trying to solve it on the other end that won't make the same capital investment. So I see this as a very difficult catch up until hygiene school becomes a private equity playhouse and they want to start funding those things because they think they can make a lot of money off of it.
Yeah, private equity or even private education.
Anybody,
Yeah.
literally anybody with a deep pocket enough to start an educational program.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, because this is such a great topic, and I don't want to go away from this topic for too long, but I also think that there's so many viewers and listeners that are going to hear this that would love to know the context from which you're speaking. And so you've been involved in so many entities along the way in dentistry. Could you maybe give our listeners like a Cliff's Notes version of where you've been in dentistry? I mean, you've been involved in the Crown Council, the Total Patient Service Institute. There's a lot of these terms floating around here, but if you could maybe put that in a context and give our listeners a little Cliff's Notes version, and I think that will even add more value to some of what you're sharing with us tonight. And
all right, thanks for that, Jeff. I'll give you a quick excuse me, I'll give you a quick history. This is going to age me a little bit, but I think the history is important. So the entree into dentistry happened in the late 80s. And I was, my business partner was the late Walter Haley. Walter was a serial Texas entrepreneur. Those that have been in practice for long enough might remember him. And we did what was then called dental boot camp. Dentistry stumbled across what we were doing in the business world, found an application to what we're doing, and we started getting more and more interested in what the dynamics were in dentistry. And that's a whole other conversation. And
let me interrupt you right there, because Mac Lee has become one of our really great contributors, and I've learned a lot about it.
Great contributor.
It's just nice seeing all of this kind of come full circle. I'll let you go, but I had to throw that in.
Absolutely. So a lot of great dentists that have been involved, in that early journey, including Mac. And so that was really our first, that whole era of, from the late 80s into the early 2000s. And we worked with literally thousands of practices all over the country, primarily on the case acceptance side, on just making things more patient-centric, making dentistry more understandable to the patient so they'd accept full mouth dentistry, not, one crown at a time, but comprehensive care. And so out of that, we rebranded in the early 2000s after Walter passed away, Total Patient Service, which is our education and coaching brand. So we have a whole army of what we call practice advisors at the TOPS Institute that cover the country every day. So we're in practices every day, implementing the highest level of patient service and case acceptance skills. So on any given day, I'm getting data fed to me from all over the country, literally coast to coast, from Massachusetts to California to everywhere we're working with people. So it really gives us an interesting view of what's going on, globally with dentistry in the country. And then on top of that, we've got our whole Crown Council organization, which is an affiliation of leading practices that are committed to creating what we call a culture of success in their practice, of really creating a amazing patient experience and a great place to work. So we got thousands of those across the country that I'm getting information from every day. So a lot of data points, right? From, currently as well as historically. So it's just, for me, it's interesting to look at what's happening today in the context of where we've been and where we've come from. And so that's why I say, in all the years that we've been doing this, there's always talk about insurance, but never at the level there is today. Have I ever seen it in all those decades? It's a real issue, and it's an issue that has to be addressed just strictly from a business economic standpoint. And so, Jeff, hopefully that gives a little bit of context.
No, that's great.
Where all this is coming from. But there's some questions, as I said when we first started, this isn't about the answer at first as much as it is about the questions that I think every practice ought to be asking themselves all the time as a regular practice, just to keep your practice evergreen. And so when a dentist calls me and says, should I be insurance free? The first thing I ask is, what kind of dentistry are you doing? Give me, if we did a procedure code analysis, what am I going to see? What kind of procedures are you doing? Is this a crown and bridge practice? Are you doing cosmetics? Are you treating sleep? Are you doing implants? You doing clear aligner? What are you doing? What kind of dentistry are you doing? Because if the key to any business is differentiation, right? We all know that. You can't, if you got a dental practice that's perceived as being just like every other dental practice down the street, then it's going to be pretty tough to then do any kind of marketing that's going to draw people to you that are looking for something other than just what their insurance company provides or the office that's on the list. So what kind of procedures you're doing and what kind of service do you provide? What separates you from everybody else? If somebody comes up to you, Chad, and says, what do you do? And your response is, I'm a dentist. Well, I just put you on the shelf and dismissed you because I know what a dentist is. But if you can tell me, Jeff, if I asked you that question and you can tell me what's unique and different about your practice, now there's a point of conversation where now you've separated yourself from everybody else. So where's your point of differentiation? I gotta hear that first. Otherwise, insurance isn't even on the radar yet until we can address that question. First, basic 101, what makes you different? Then, number two, we got a lot of math to do because this is an economics question, which is, and we got a whole math formula that we run through on this to say, what percentage of the practice is contracted, what percentage of patient base is fee for service, the whole deal. And we got some magic numbers. And I'll give you an example of one of those magic numbers. If somebody says, well, should I drop XYZ insurance? And my first question is, what percentage of your patient base is contracted with that particular insurance? For us, there may not be any perfect magic number, but if it's less than 30%, we're going to have one conversation. If it's more than 30% of your patient base, we're going to have a very different conversation. Now, whether it's 35% or 25%, you get the idea, is if we get to that magic number of about a third, then there's going to be two different conversations. I can take a third. If it's less than a third, then we've got a path that we can walk down we can comfortably ease out of that, and you probably won't feel a whole lot different. If it's more than a third, then I got to take a different approach, and we got to ask some different questions, because ultimately this comes down to patient flow. So as an example, if the typical contracted practice, we find will spend 4 to 5% of revenue on marketing. So if I got most of my patients are contracted, we usually find 4 to 5% of the marketing or of the budget marketing. It's 4 to 5% towards marketing because you're getting a lot of your patients from insurance companies. Typical fee for service. And Chad, you're all fee for service. I don't know what your marketing budget is. A lot of this depends on the market, but that marketing budget is more upwards of 10% or more. You got to spend more when you're not on a list to be able to get the kind of patient flow that you want and you need, and to attract the right kind of patients. So that's the next shift is, what's your marketing strategy? What's your budget? What's your new patient flow? how are we going to shift the investment so that you continue good quality patient flow if you're not going to have insurance involvement? So that's just an example of all the kinds of questions I think every practice ought to be asking, the math you need to run, the calculations you need to make. And Chad, to your point, I think the biggest mental and emotional hurdle in this whole thing is this truth: is everyone has choice. The greatest freedom that we have, especially in this country, is we have the freedom to choose. You got the freedom how to choose how to run your business. Patients have the freedom to choose of where they go, whether or not the practice takes their insurance or not. Patients have the right to choose, regardless of what their insurance company tells them. They have the right to choose. And you've got the right to choose how you run your practice. That's what we love about America, and that right has not been taken away. No matter how you feel, no matter emotionally where you are, you have the right to choose. You just got to figure out the path to get there. So,
I don't mean to cut you off, but I noticed something really quick here, that you are you're helping your clients choose the best path forward rather than, pushing them in one direction. It's not a one size fits all.
It's not.
What's for my practice may not be the same for Jeff and Jennifer's. And I
Very
love
different.
that. I love that. And I think that's just such a fantastic approach, rather than this is the way we do it, you're going to do it this way, or you need to find somebody else.
Well, no, can I give you just one example of this, Chad, that
No.
I just warms my heart?
Of course you can. Yeah.
But I'll just give you an example of this. We work with a practice that is in a rural community, and they are one of the few dental practices in town, and they are killing it. I'm not going to tell you where it is.
Yeah.
But this particular dentist of one provider, amazing practice. His take home last year was $1 million as a general dentist, one doctor practice. He's killing it. And he's got more patients than he knows what to do with. He's like 60% contracted with one of the biggest insurance carriers in the country. And he called me, goes, he asked the same question, goes, Steve, should I be insurance free? I mean, we got more patients than we know what to do with. I'm making more money than I ever thought was imaginable in this profession. I'm doing awesome. So we walked through the whole equation, every question, every math deal, the whole deal. And it made every sense to him for him to go, I can do this. We can go insurance free, the whole deal. And he chose not to. And the reason he chose not to is because of the community. And this is the beautiful thing about freedom of choice. He goes, look, on paper, all the economics, there's no reason we can't do this. And he said, and I know the people in this community. And he said, I know the biggest employers in town. And he said, I feel an obligation to serve these people where they ought to be served. And we'll work with their care. We're going to do whatever, but I'm not going to turn my back on this town because there's no other option right now.
That's awesome.
And it was his choice. Economically, all day long, he could move in another direction, but his choice, his business, he gets to do what he wants to do. And that's the beauty of it. Nobody can tell you what's right or what's wrong. You get to make your own decision. And it is a very personal, individual decision for the market, for the practice and the practitioner. That's what I love about it.
And you're obviously able to help him thrive with his decision.
In either environment. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
The other side I worry about with something like that, though, is, most of us understand that the formula when you're accepting a lower reimbursement is that typically you have to increase your volume for every reduction in reimbursement that you have. So the other side of that argument is, what's the price that he is paying in order to keep doing it? In other words, as a solo practitioner, how many hours is he having to put in just to keep up with that patient load?
Yeah.
And so I understand, because I've made a lot of decisions based on my community as well.
Yeah.
So I fully understand that. I'm not knocking him in any way for the decision he's made or the advice given or anything, but I just wonder how sustainable that is
Oh, and
over a long
Jeff, I'm
period
with
of time.
you 100%. And that's why I say these are questions that have to be asked on a regular basis, because he may look up, Jeff, in 2 years and go, you know what? It was good for 2 years ago, but this is not sustainable. I got to pivot. And he may do that. So it's not, you don't make this decision once and you're done, as much as it's like, what's right for the market, for me, for right now, for the vision I want to have and what I want to do. But it's an ongoing deal, because the market changes. The market changes, insurance things change. It is, I mean, Jennifer, you went through it in your whole news thing. Trends change, how practices are held. I mean, so it's not a decision you make once and you're done. It's evergreen. It's ongoing. So especially now.
So I have a question for you. And my question relates to just kind of just personal curiosity, but what is it about dentistry? You're not a dentist, and I'm not saying that negatively, but you're not a dentist. But what is it about dentistry that made you so interested in dentistry, and how did all of this get started with you? Because you're extremely knowledgeable. That's kind of where I'm headed.
So I'm glad.
Are we suckers? Or
no, I'll tell you what it was. This is deeply rooted in psychology. So let me take you back to the origins of this. Can we talk sales for a minute, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Why does a salesperson fail? You guys all, you all know somebody who sells as a profession, whether it's insurance or real estate or stockbroker. You all know.
We sell for a profession.
According to Fox News, it's because they haven't read this book. I mean, it comes on every morning on Sirius XM that they haven't read the book. So that's what I'm going to go with.
All right. Yeah. So here's the short answer. You can't make it in sales if you can't endure through rejection. Because the salesperson has to deal with rejection all day long. And they got to have enough of what we call ego drive to push through the fear of rejection, push through the no. I mean, if you're going to sell life insurance, you got to endure a lot of no's to get to the yes. And it's that desire to get to the yes that'll allow you to push through the no, right? But if you can't endure the no, if you can't endure the rejection, if you take that too personally, you'll never make it in sales. You'll fold. Yeah. So anybody that you know that tried to make it in a sales profession in any way, shape, or form and didn't make it is because they couldn't handle the fear of rejection. They couldn't do it. Okay, so that is the backdrop. We're working in the business world, and our primary, what we were working is we had a workaround to that problem, a workaround to the fear of rejection. So we were working with organizations all over the country and re-engineering the whole sales process so that fear of rejection would not be an issue in the sales process. It's a whole system, right? A whole marketing system so that would not stand in the way of somebody being successful in sales. So dentistry had not even on the radar. So Dr. Ron Presswood initially in Houston, Texas shows up at one of our business courses. Ron was a big Pankey advocate, was a mentee of Dr. LD Pankey. He kind of apologized for being there. Didn't really know I was there. A patient of his told him about us. He went back to his practice and applied all the systems, dentalized it, hit a home run, came back and introduced us to all of his friends in Houston, Mac Lee being one of those. And Mac came and he caught the vision and introduced it to Dr. Pete Dawson and a lot of other people. And here was the deal. Here's the connection. Dentistry is unique in a lot of different aspects but one is this. How many times a day, Jeff, Chad, does somebody walk into your office and say to your receptionist, your front office team, and even to you, they say, you know, I hate the dentist. How often? It's like every day. What other profession is it socially acceptable to do that? Name me one, except for maybe attorneys.
Proctologist.
Yeah.
Proctologist. Yeah.
Right? But I mean, there's
But most
not
people don't have an ongoing relationship with
No.
their proctologist.
right.
No.
Well,
If
yeah,
you
but
do,
I mean,
you're weird.
it's not like, I mean, could you guys imagine? I mean, Chad, could you imagine going into one of your son's teachers at school and walking in and say, I hate teachers?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you just wouldn't do that. So here's the bottom line of this is what we figured out is that dentists as a group have a bigger psychological hill to climb as it has to do with fear of rejection. Everybody wants to be liked. And so when you're in a profession, when people are coming in every day going, I hate the dentist, I hate to be here, I don't like doing the whole deal, then dentistry overextends itself to be liked.
Yeah.
And so what happens is it results in underdiagnosis. Now, Jennifer, I get it. You get all the news stories about the crook in Texas that overdiagnosed and screwed Medicare and all that. I get that. But the reason it gets into the news is because it's so few and far between.
Yeah.
There is more underdiagnosis and more undertreatment going on in dentistry because everybody wants to be liked. And so it's, it's the language is like, well, maybe you might want to kind of take a look at this sometime, but we'll wait, we'll watch, we'll see, we'll look at it next time. So it's all this limiting language because the dentist, the team, everybody wants the patients to like them because they don't want to be rejected. So we had
and it's a double-edged sword because you are the diagnostician, then you have to communicate that information. You're financially compensated for performing the procedure, and you have to hurt them in the process. So it's like it is actually a terrible conundrum that you find yourself in. You're like, okay, so here's the deal. We're about to have a terrible conversation where I'm going to tell you something. You're going to take it personally, like I'm judging you, but I'm not really judging you. Then I'm going to politely suggest that you come back and pay me more money, where I'll shove sharp things in your face for an hour, pat you on the back and say you did a fantastic job, and then pray really hard that it doesn't hurt the next day, which will then cost you exponentially more money. Like it's.
You got it. So that was a long answer to your question. But the bottom line is, it was that whole emotional equation of how do we do a workaround on this whole fear of rejection thing so that it doesn't stand in the way of comprehensive care, so that we can do full mouth dentistry, present it with confidence without the fear of being rejected, and get more patients to accept dentistry that they really need. So in the early days, the late Dr. P. Dawson, one of the first things he said to us, Jeff, when he saw this in its entirety the first time, he said, this is the missing link. He goes, this is what we have needed in dentistry for decades. This is what stood in the way of doing full mouth comprehensive care. We got to have it. So that's really the origin of all of this. It goes back to some very deep-seated psychological things that every dentist has to address. And if they don't, then that whole fear of rejection, we call it approval addiction, is going to stand in the way of patient care.
Yeah.
That it's such a great point. And at least once a quarter, we have a very spirited discussion in our group about the word selling. And you can call it what you want. As soon as you use the word sales or selling, you get all these dentists who say, oh, I don't sell. I don't ever have to sell. And I say, bull dinky, right? Exactly. And that's the first time I've ever said bull dinky in my whole life. But I'm originally from New Jersey.
I didn't even know what bull dinky is.
Yeah,
it's a Texas term, Jennifer. Even from South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Can you also fill potholes with it? Because I'm down.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, well, no, we don't have to try to convince somebody to get something that they maybe don't need or don't want. We may not have to persuade them into something that they don't otherwise need, but we always have to be selling our professionalism, selling ourselves, selling the care that we're able to provide, at least selling confidence in a way. So I really do think that every dentist needs to understand sales to some degree. And okay, if you don't want to call it sales, great. I'm fine with that. Call it something else to make yourself feel better, but we're all doing it. And in a business, we do all have something that needs to be consumed by the consumer. And therefore, our job is, how do we help this person who needs our help? How do we convince them of our worth and the worth of our services?
100%. No, you're spot on, Jeff. And as a patient, let me just speak personally here for a minute, because I probably had, because of my involvement in dentistry over the years, I probably had more dentistry done than 99% of the patients in America. Mac Lee took out my wisdom teeth originally. I had 8 years ago, I had double jaw surgery. I had a genetic airway condition. I had an airway that was the size of a coffee straw. And thanks to some of the most talented, some of the best talent in dentistry, changed my life. I mean, I had to take my face off and rearrange it to do it, but it was a game changer for me.
Absolutely.
Every tooth in my mouth's been restored. I've been through the whole deal. And here's the thing for me as a patient. And I, every day, I am grateful to be involved with dentists who get it, because, you know, Jeff, nobody sold me anything, but you know what they did is they found out what I wanted and they showed me a way to get it. And what I wanted to live. And I'm being a little dramatic maybe, but I had a condition that was life-threatening. I had an airway that I was the perfect candidate to have a sleep apnea, heart attack, or I was the guy who was going to probably die in his sleep, because that's how bad it was. And I don't fit the typical profile of a sleep apnea guy. But nobody had to sell me anything. But you know what they needed to do that they did is they took a genuine interest in me and what I wanted and what my goals were. And they took their clinical expertise and they figured out what my problem was. And they showed me a way to get what I wanted. And to me, that is the true mission. That's what we all should be doing in dentistry, is what do our patients want? Then take our great clinical expertise and show them the path to get there. And it sounds simple, but there's a whole process for it that once it's mastered, it changes everything. And so,
yeah. No, I was just going to say though that, but I think so much of that is taught. And again, I'll use the bad word. So much of that is taught to us from the sales world. And again, it doesn't have to be called sales. I've never thought of myself as a salesperson. I've never tried to sell anything to anyone that they didn't need or want or desire, or, you know, I mean, there's no need for that. We make a great living. But I think so many of these principles need to be taught and understood for us to kind of get over that hump of, oh my gosh, should I be talking about it this much? No, yeah. You educate passionately, and if you understand what some of the roadblocks are for people to be able to say yes, then that just makes you, I think it actually allows more treatment to be performed that needed to be performed in the first place, and saves lives potentially, and that's a win-win.
100%. Yeah, when you get it, and I'll tell you, if I have a regret, I got a lot of regrets, but one of my
Chad has no regrets.
Yeah,
regrets.
You know what? One of my regrets. I wish I would have discovered this profession earlier than I did. I probably, knowing what I know now, I'd be a dentist all day long. I love this profession, and you know, passion is I don't get to fix the teeth, but I get to fix the guys who fix the teeth, which
That's true.
getting the systems dialed in, which I think is, at the end of the day, is even a better position because, just so many patients will benefit. And my whole goal is I hope I can be a big enough influence that there's more patients like me that can get the benefit of the amazing clinical expertise that's out there. That needs to be, it's dentistry is the frontline healthcare profession in America. You think about it, what other healthcare segment sees more of America on a more regular basis than we do? Name me one. We see 50 to 60% of America 1 to 2 or more times a year. Who does that? No other healthcare profession does that, except for, if acute care, yes, for the small segment. But as far as the masses go, we're it. We see more of America than any other segment of healthcare. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to set the standard for healthcare, that we should be the ones, dentistry should be the ones setting the standard for patient service, for patient care. We should be leading the industry in all of those things, because we're doing more of it than anybody else. And it's all these decisions along the way that impact that. Like, what's my relationship going to be with insurance that'll allow me the freedom to serve the people I want to serve in the way I want to serve them. Yeah. It's one of the many, many decisions that you got to make, and you got to make ongoing.
I love this. I really do. I think it's just been so enlightening. It's really, thank you so much for everything you've said.
I could do this another hour.
Let's do it again. There is a resource, and I'm not sure who's in charge of show notes.
I got you. What you got?
But there is a resource in terms of the questions to ask that anybody who's listening tonight's welcome to download. And it's called Should You Be Insurance Free? And it kind of walks through some of the questions that you ought to be asking. Chad, do you have that?
I do. They sent it to me today. I've got it opened up, but I can't comment on here. I'm going to comment on my phone in just a second here, and I'm going to post that link.
Yeah, perfect. So alternatively, you can go to totalpatientservice.com. So it's Total Patient Service, not services, but service.com. And you can request it there as well. But it's called Should You Be Insurance Free? And again, it's not about the answer. It's about all the questions. If you call me, and you're welcome to call me, if you ask me that question, I will not give you the answer. Everybody knows this about me. I will ask you at least a dozen questions. And when you can answer those questions, you will have the answer. And Jeff, it's like you said, it's different for every practice. Don't you ever allow anybody to tell you what you should do for your practice, in your market, in your patient base. It's your practice. You get to decide, and it's a very personal decision, and you get to make it if you choose to make it.
I love the way that you form that with the should you be insurance free, and to help people make their own decisions. So I thank you. I thank you very much for being here. I know
thank you guys, all three of you. My pleasure, and an honor to be with you guys.
Well, we'll definitely have you back. That's for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, and Chad, I'm going to be watching for you now out my front window when you ride down the road on your bicycle.
You won't see me because the expensive bike is still hanging in the garage, and I think I picked up golf again. So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to grab dinner some night soon. I'm going to shoot you a message this week. We'll set that up.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me. And again, my challenge to everybody that's listening is, because I hear this all the time. I hear it from dentists all the time. Well, we're captive. We can't. Insurance won't let us hold deal. Baloney. You have the freedom to choose. You got into this business, and you get to run it the way you want to run it. You got to find the right resources to do it. But don't you ever quit believing in the freedom to choose. Greatest human freedom we've got. You got to retain it.
That we still have.
You got it.
We still have it. Yeah. and I'm going to go choose to dump some dental molds in my potholes in the street.
Just don't dump them in front of my house, man.
All right. Well, Dove Road does need a little help, so
there are some places.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna call my kids and make sure none of them have any sharp knives around the house.
Hey, when y'all come to town, we're gonna go ding dong to Steve's house. We're gonna
Perfect.
do it, man. I know where he is now. I'll be like, yeah, I think it's this one. So, all right. Well,
it's the other one with the large Texas-sized bookcase. We'll find it. It's fine.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Steve.
Hey,
really appreciate your time.
All right. Have a good night. And good night, everybody.
Night. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you very much. That was I want to say spirited. And usually after that comes debate, but it wasn't really a debate. It was just a spirited conversation. That was amazing. So thanks so much to Steve and his team for putting that together. I put the link to the Should You Be Insurance Free download. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.